And
I don't know, I'm trying to.
okay.
I'm just giving them. Hello! And we can know. What do you want from me? I've said hello so many times I've lost the grip on reality.
Do you want me to say hello?
No.
Okay.
Because I don't know the rest of it.
Oh, true.
Hello.
Welcome back to Planetary Astrology. I'm Nina.
I'm Shaina.
And this is part 2 of the 9th house video, aka 9th house planetary placements. If you want to watch part 1, we talk about sort of what the 9th house means, and we describe the long-awaited explanation of what it means to say, haven't you ever ridden that streetcar? So it's a video worth checking out. And if you don't have any placements in the 9th house and you want to know what your 9th house means by looking at its house cusp ruler, you can go to our website, partytrickastrology.com, to check out our blog post on all the 9th house cusp rulers, as well as all the cusp rulers from houses 8 to 1. While you're at it, you can go to partytrickastrology.com/shop to see what readings we have in stock and what readings we have to offer in general. All readings are always in stock the first of every month.
We also have an astrology course available, which is supplemental to the series, and that will start once the series is finally over, which we're gonna get.
We're trying, man. With that all being said, let's get into the 9th house planetary placements.
Yes.
Starting with the sun.
Oh, the sun in the 9th house. What a lovely placement, truly.
I would agree. I think the only real hang up with the sun in the 9th house is that because the 9th house is a house that you kind of reach later in your development, it can be harder to find a sense of self before you really branch out and kind of find some kind of beliefs that you can stake your identity on. But it can also be an indication that from a young age you're exposed to lots of different cultures and different points of view, that you possibly had a more positive religious upbringing, and that is something that influences your sense of self, your identity.
Yeah, and something that I think is very beautiful about Sun in the 9th house is that while you're younger, yes, you definitely probably will have trouble finding yourself fully and identifying with yourself, but there's something beautiful about kind of waiting a little longer, and there's just much more of a growth. And because of the mutability of the 9th house, there's much more of an ability to change with kind of your environment. And it can feel like you're always looking beyond the horizon and you're never really happy where you are. At least it's not fixed, you know what I mean?
Right.
You can kind of daydream and always want what's on the other side. At some point in your life, you're going to have to accept where you are, and that it might not be where the big dream of where you saw yourself. The beauty of the 9th house is the seeking, constantly learning, and there's just much more of a want to not take everything for granted.
In general, it's very, very positive. And I think the only real issue that I can think of 9th house placements, and this is sun through everything, is especially if you have a chart that is perhaps mostly fire and air and lacking in earth, just the groundedness can be difficult. It can be hard to feel comfortable with not moving because you are constantly looking beyond the horizon. You can feel a little bit of anxiousness of thinking of, oh, but if I have this going on, then maybe I won't be as free as I want to be to do whatever I want. It maybe is just a bit of a difficulty in grounding or
settling
commitment
down.
Issues.
Yeah.
Not commitment issues as in like you'll never get married, but just like, I have a Sagittarius moon. If I buy anything with frequency and they're like, you can save $1 by subscribing to have this come to you every couple of months, I'm like, I cannot commit to that, you know?
Yeah, and just take that times everything.
Yes.
3rd house deals with these little facts, blah, blah, blah. So 9th house really can get hooked on a topic and want to learn everything, and then just quick get onto something else. You probably have so much knowledge about these certain things, and you might not know as much about these little day-to-day things. 9th house suns very much love, philosophy. They're very much into thinking about life as on a greater scale, and probably some of the people that have always been like, what is life? What's the meaning of life? and never thought of that as something that they need to answer, but just something that they want to contemplate and will constantly be kind of changing their opinion on as life goes on. And generally, ninth house suns will have a more positive outlook on life, just because they will always keep their sense of hope.
Yeah, and there is kind of a surrender of, well, I don't know everything. But I typically, in my head, compare the 9th house and the 12th house in Sagittarius and Pisces together, just because Jupiter rules or co-rules both of them, and they're both mutable signs. And Sagittarius is the less mutable of the two. And since the 9th house has a lot to do with beliefs and religion even, I have been going down this rabbit hole of watching like Christians debate other Christians, sitting in this 9th house energy, and atheists debating Christians and all these like points of view. The 9th house and Sagittarius, I think, relates more to this kind of, well, this is what it says in the Bible, or this is what scripture says, and this, that, and the other. And more 12th house and Pisces things will be like, I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit. And neither one is right or wrong, though of course if you belong to either of those schools of thought, you probably think that yours is right.
Ninth house suns in general tend to have a very lovely open mind. They're much more willing to try things, go places. They're just nice to have around, because even if what you're doing kind of wound up being a dud, they'll still just be happy for the experience. Because ninth house suns really are just trying to live life to collect experiences. And that's where they can get stifled very easily, because if you do the same thing every day, you're not doing anything new, you're not doing anything different, and you're not learning anything. And so there is a kind of a little bit of a chaotic nature to ninth house suns because of that, but also there's the beauty in even the bad experiences, they can have a much more positive outlook on, because at the end of the day, they're just trying to grow and they're just trying to learn.
Yeah, it's almost like everything happens for a reason kind of mentality. Not necessarily everything happens for the reason because I put my faith in whatever, but even as far as like, hey, we couldn't go to this restaurant, but we found this new restaurant. You know, there was a little snag in the road, but it led to this, that, and the other. You know?
Yeah. This is definitely a placement where probably you'll find yourself in college, or you'll find yourself traveling or in a different land, or you'll probably find yourself as maybe one of the only people from your hometown that got out. Like my mom is a ninth house sun, and she's from Denver, and whenever I go back there, I'm like, everybody from Denver stays in Denver like very dramatically. And my mom's like, I don't know how I got out.
Yeah. Or from a young age, you were introduced to different cultures and that very much became like, I am the person who is a first generation American. I am the person who has a foreign father, or foreign mother, or is an immigrant.
Probably a father with your son being in there. Yeah. With a ninth house sun, you probably grew up in a little bit of a like differently structured house than most people that you're around for whatever reason. Because of that, there isn't as much of a norm to you about things. So and I think that also has to do with the acceptance of it, of things and people. These are people that are going to be big teachers, or very much like in school, they might have connected more to their teacher than their students. You're just constantly trying to teach and learn and take in information, basically. Moon in the ninth house.
So moon in the ninth house, you'll hear this particular phrase I'm about to say a lot with Sagittarius moon and moon in the ninth house, and that is an anywhere but here attitude. Moon in the ninth house, I see a couple more trip ups that you can have than sun in the ninth house, just because it's not an intuitive way to deal with your emotions to kind of look anywhere but here, to kind of look beyond the horizon.
With ninth house moons, it can very easily be quick to push them away or run away from them.
There's more of that feeling of not feeling emotionally satisfied
and stable,
and stable and like grounded. Think of, oh, wouldn't it be better if this happened? Wouldn't it be better if this? A positive thing that I can take away with moon in the ninth house is that, as opposed to the eighth house that we just came out of, these are the kind of people that even if they are upset over something, I do not see them holding grudges.
And dwelling on it.
There's very much of like a, let's just get over it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm upset about it, but I understand that
that's
you just gotta get over it. My mom is a ninth house moon. I heard a billion times in my life, Shaina, just get over it.
Yeah, and so that can be great because you don't dwell on stuff, but that also you can fall into the trap of getting over it, just meaning not dealing with it.
Exactly.
Another trip up with the moon in the 9th house is the moon, as we always say, it's the fastest moving luminary planet, whatever. But the moon wants so much to be stable. Like what everybody wants, stable emotions. But putting the moon, which is already so quickly changing, in such a house can just make it so emotionally exhausted a lot. And I think that's where a lot of the escapism comes from, and there can be a lot more dissatisfaction with where you're at than most people because of this constant need for change and this constant, also a constant need in a certain way for everything to be okay.
But I also think that there's also the sense of belief that everything's going to be okay at the same time. Like on the one hand, you want everything to be okay, and you can get overwhelmed if things get into a rut, or if something comes up that you don't want to deal with, you can run away from that. On the one hand, you can be like that. On the other hand, you can be like, I surrender and know that everything's going to be okay.
The 9th house is much more of an acceptance of that's life.
Yeah.
So they'll be much more likely to surrender to the bad things, and like somebody with Libra will just try to make everything okay. 9th house moons, this could even be a position where you weren't really allowed to be emotional when you were younger. You weren't allowed to show your emotions. That wasn't something that was okay until you went away and you went somewhere else, and maybe you went into a much more emotionally accepting place, college, environment, whatever it is, and you might find that when you were younger, you're like, I was not an emotional child, but for whatever reason, it just kind of all kept caught up with me at some point. As like we said, a mother who might have had an anywhere but here attitude, kind of flighty, and you can kind of see her want to run sometimes. And so you kind of always have this feeling of like, I cannot be trapped, I do not want to, if it's negatively aspected, I don't want to wind up like my mom, stuck where she is, you know what I mean? Or if it's positively aspected, your mom might have moved somewhere else and she's a foreigner, and you're like, oh, you look up to that and stuff.
And gain a lot of culture from your mom. There's also a very independent streak with 9th house energy, so I think that when it comes to dealing with your emotions, you probably had to teach yourself like, this is a situation where I just have to get over it. This kind of creates more fearless people with their emotions, and if they come up against something that they have to deal with,
like an obstacle?
An obstacle, an emotional obstacle, they learn very fast of how to deal with it in a very not messy kind of way. And you'll notice with these people is that they really learn emotionally, because it's a learning house, and so they learn their lessons, and they learn them once emotionally, and maybe they needed to learn it in a more hands-on kind of way than just being talked at of like, no, you can't do this, but they putting it in their own hands and being like, oh, this works.
The 9th house is all about experience. You learn through experience, not being told. So you can be told how to deal with something a billion times, but you won't learn it until you go through it once. And Sagittarius...
And it only takes once.
Yes, exactly. Sagittarius does not need more than once. Also very connected to your views. Your either religious views, your spiritual views, your philosophical views, very, very much emotionally invested and connected to them. This can be a little preachy sometimes, but whatever it is that you believe in it because you feel it. You just intuitively know and you feel.
Yeah, I think a big word for moon in the 9th house, whether this is the way you are or maybe the way that you wish you could be or something that you tap into, is just the surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender is a big word for 9th house moons. Mercury in the 9th house.
This is not the most intuitive placement because Mercury likes to be in the 3rd house. This is one of the few placements in the 9th house that's a little bit overwhelmed, because the 9th house is all about big ideas, mostly deals with unanswerable questions, and most things in the 9th house are okay with that and really like that, but Mercury does not like that. Mercury wants finite answers, so it can be hard because you're dealing with these huge broad topics like life, who am I, what is this, why are we here, and you're constantly looking for an end-all be-all answer.
Right. The reason that it's quite unintuitive is because Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini, which are the signs that square and oppose Sagittarius, and Sagittarius rules the 9th house. And the way that this practically you can see does not make sense is that, Mercury rules the 3rd house. And the 3rd house goes A, B, C, D. With Mercury in the 9th house, you just want to zoom on past and go A, elemental P.
Yes.
And it's
Quick,
hard
give us the
because
picture.
you have absolutely no desire to have the building blocks to build an understanding to get to A, B, C, D, all the way to element OP. You're just like, A, element OP.
My mom has a ninth house, Sun and Mercury. Okay, I'm just gonna use this example because it's just an easy one. So like when my mom got cancer, she did a very ninth house thing of trying to find all the information that she could about cancer and her cancer and what she should do. But the issue with ninth house Mercury is that she collected all this information, but making her decision about what the best thing for her to do is almost impossible because she can see everything and it's hard to deny one as right or wrong. Does that make sense? So it can be hard to come to a finite conclusion of things or how you really feel. And so what you can wind up being is just a person who collects a lot of information without any actual solid opinions at the end. Because you don't want to deny or prove anything that isn't 100% factual.
Yeah, Sagittarius is kind of like a wide tooth comb, and like what Mercury needs is a fine tooth comb. Because Gemini and Virgo for sure are fine tooth combs, and Sagittarius doesn't really have time to like pick through and like go into the nitty-gritty of things. It's fast, it's big picture, and for that reason it can be hard to develop building blocks into getting to a conclusion. It can be hard to narrow down into a decision or an opinion
because it knows so much. And so if there's not like 2 + 2 = 4, it's like how can I make my own decision when all of these things could be true?
Yeah. So it creates quite a scatterbrained kind of person, especially if your chart is mostly air and fire.
Yeah. But somebody with a lot of information, a lot of smarts, they know more about things than most people in the sense of they're willing to look at more perspectives.
Yeah.
And because they're willing to look at more perspectives, they have a more wide view of things.
I remember Alyssa Sharp talking about kind of Sagittarius and ninth house energy as, oh, everyone thinks that you're like spacey and stupid. Everyone kind of like undermines your intelligence. And at first I was like, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because I mean the ninth house is the house of higher education, and I would consider that to be a very smart thing, very intellectual. But the reason why it can get interpreted as like, oh wow, you're just like too spacey in like a, you know, spacey is just like, you're like bimbo-y. Like here's an example. I do not have Gemini energy at all. And in my opinion, you know, when I was younger, I was like, Gemini, who needs Gemini energy? It's like stupid, small-minded. Who needs that? I've got Sagittarius energy. It's great. I get my intelligence overlooked all the time, and I get people assuming that I'm stupid for whatever reason. And I'm like, I'm here, like, I think I'm pretty smart. I know a lot about astrology, and that's the thing. I don't know a lot about Gemini little things.
You don't know about the everyday little things that everybody just has kind of common knowledge about.
Exactly. So when someone doesn't know a lot of common knowledge, it's easy to be like, oh, they're stupid.
Yeah.
But you can have like so much knowledge on some very
weird off
on something that a lot of that almost nobody has a lot of knowledge on, and that doesn't get recognized as easily as basketball teams.
Sagittarius has those few big things that they focus and hone in on and know everything about. And so it can lead to a neglect of all the other shit they don't give a fuck about. The curiosity is in a few topics, not in everything. Venus in the ninth house.
Fun.
So probably one of like most intuitive things is you'll probably find love overseas or traveling or just fall in love with somebody of a different culture or background of you, and just in general you have much more of an appreciation and love for just different people and different experiences and different cultures and traditions.
Yeah, those are kind of like the party tricks, as well as maybe you'll find love later in life. Your value of yourself might be more identified with once you have broadened your horizons, once you've acquired some culture or some travel experience or something like that. Perhaps a lot of your sense of value comes from having had an upbringing that is full of culture. You know, you love languages. If you speak multiple languages, you love learning about them. And just in general, you might be attracted to more like teachers, professors,
people that you feel like can guide you and teach you, that's what you find
That
sexy.
can expand your mind. You're definitely in love for an experience. Like the experiences there, definitely depending on the sign and other things, but this might give you a bit more of a carefree kind of go with the flow thing with love.
This is a placement that might get married in Vegas, you know, because fuck it. Or just more spontaneous.
More adventurous. Maybe you would go on a reality show because why not? And there's no like kind of direct idea of, oh, this needs to happen, or like Venus in the 9th house is the kind of person who's like, hey, I kind of just surrendered up to the universe. I thought it would be a fun experience to go on this reality TV dating show, and wow, looks like I actually kind of found love because I only manifest good things for my life in love. Taking shots and trying new things always favors me when I adventure out in love.
Yeah, this is probably somebody who has a very party-filled later life, just in the sense, it doesn't have to be, but because Venus likes to indulge, and the 9th house likes those fun drinking, partying things, so you just might really indulge in that kind of stuff when you're a teen. I think this is kind of a placement of like, when you get older, you're like, oh yeah, I was a crazy person back in the days, I kind of leveled out, but definitely in college, I was like all about the party.
Yeah, and in terms of how Venus influences your house, because any house that Venus is in blesses that house, you just probably maybe even take for granted how enjoyable and blessed your higher education or traveling life or just like relationship with spirituality is. It's just very enjoyable for you, very blessed.
Also, in general, this makes you more likable. You really have this more open attitude towards things, so you're going to attract a lot more people, a lot more naturally friendly, because Venus, Jupiter, that is just a big shining light, both of those. You might even find that you have more friends than actual like relationships, just because of the sense of you're a little bit flighty, a little bit here, there, everywhere, so you might make a lot of friends. But I feel like this can be a placement where you're not the typical relationship person. Don't do this, then this, then this, then this. You want to kind of exist on your own kind of plane. And it also might be somebody who has like different preferences than the norm, and maybe that wasn't accepted where you're from, and you had to go off and travel somewhere else to where that was accepted, you know, where you really were able to embrace those things.
Because Venus and the Sun move so closely together, there's a big chance that if you have Venus in the 9th house, you could have your Sun in the 8th house. And in that interpretation, I really see, you're going through all of these things as an 8th house Sun, and what comes after the 8th house is the 9th house is learning and growing and self-development. And I think with Venus in the 9th house, whether you have your Sun in the 8th house or not, but especially if you have your Sun in the 8th house, shows relationships as just like a really great opportunity for you to develop yourself, to develop skills as a person, to broaden your horizons, to grow. Through partnerships, you can grow fantastically and learn a lot about yourself and about life. About the world.
And this is also a placement where you might find is if you do travel or go anywhere, you're going to be much more accepted, or you're just more willing to kind of go with the flow, be involved in the culture, immerse yourself into it. You just have a lot of luck and lovely experiences,
It's not an incredibly troubled Venus, except for, again, refer back to lack of groundedness, commitment issues, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is definitely a placement where it doesn't want to feel tied down, very quick to run away from love just because you want to experience as much as you can, and if you get tied down to somebody too early or too soon or too much, that is saying no to a lot of potential experiences. And the same goes for kind of moving places and living in the same place. It's not as appealing to you to just kind of find one place and settle down there. You always constantly want to be searching, and I think that's smart because it kind of is kind of a little thing that says you won't find love where you grow up, and that can be hard because, throughout your younger life you might have not found it. It just does emphasize that you got to
branch out.
You got to branch out really with this position and not see that as something as there's something wrong with you or anything, but just that maybe you just don't relate as much to the people that you were raised around.
And everything happens for a reason.
But it is a very lucky placement. There's nothing in Venus in the 9th house that doesn't say you won't find love.
No.
In fact, it might say you have an overabundance of love.
Bachelor in Paradise is on right now, right? And 9th house life is van life. What Dean is going through right now, if you watch Bachelor in Paradise, is very much like a 9th house Venus sort of thing of just like, hey, I like you a lot, but I live in a van and I don't know if I can be tied down.
Yes, exactly.
That's the only thing that can really get in your way of love, but I think him and Kaylin are probably gonna end up together and Connor's gonna be so pissed, bruh.
This is somebody who loves and appreciates religion, sees the beauty in it. And with anything in the 9th house, you'd think that this would make a very religious person, as in like one hard and fast way, but I think it actually creates a much more spiritual, interested, inclined person, to where you'd be like, yeah, I'll go to church with my friend this day, and then I'll do this. It's just about experiencing, really. And sometimes it's not even deeper than that.
Yeah.
You know?
Living, experiencing, dancing, breathing, riding that streetcar.
That's true, dude. 9th house Venus won't take things as seriously, like their actions as seriously, and think about them as much as some other Venus placements will think that they do. So you can do something, go somewhere, and just because you're like, yeah, I want to do this, or I got this opportunity, I want to take it, and you may be leaving a friend behind, leaving somebody else behind, leaving your partner behind, and for you, it's nothing personal, but for them, it's like, what? Why are you doing this to me? And it's like, oh, I just had to say yes. You know,
yeah.
So there can be some conflict there.
I'm just living my van life, dude.
Yeah. Mars in the 9th house. As with 9th house placements, this is one of the only Mars placements that I think it's not too bad to have your Mars here.
Right. I mean, Mars isn't happy anywhere.
Of course not.
But
there's something that happens when you get older that it's almost like you find your self-confidence, you find your energy, you find your passion, you find your drive. You just grow up really well when you have Mars in the 9th house. Both my dad and my aunt have this. Everybody struggles to get their feet and figure things out, but they much more had a I will do this, I will figure it out attitude instead of what most people get into, which is like, oh, I'm drowning, Mars in the 9th house is like, I refuse to drown, I will keep going, and I will figure this out. There's a much more of an oomph about life to them. They won't get bogged down as easily as most people because there's just this endless energy and this endless fight in them. Almost sometimes too much, and they can be very overwhelming to even work with. Which sounds weird because it has nothing to do with work, but because these people are so like go, 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 sometimes a job you don't need all that energy. So they can go, 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 go for a measly little job, and then everybody around them is like, can you calm down? You're like, no, no.
Yeah, it's not even work necessarily, it's just like deal with, you know?
Yeah.
Like whether you're working at concessions at a movie theater or you're on a road trip, you know, that can be energy that can be difficult to deal with sometimes. Again, with the 9th house, things in the 9th house only need to learn things once. And if you go back to Mars in the 6th house, Mars in the 6th house is likely to get into fights with their coworkers. Mars in the 9th house is likely to get into conflict when they are in higher education, can get into conflict.
Teachers maybe?
Yeah, with overseas for some reason, like traveling, it can be a high point of anxiety because in your life traveling just seems to go wrong because you've got an 11th planet going on in the 9th house. You can have issues or conflicts surrounding beliefs, surrounding culture, surrounding things that the 9th house rules, obviously, but again, you only need to learn those things once you come up against those conflicts. If you have a fight with someone over certain beliefs, or if you have a fight with someone,
which you probably do a lot,
or if you have a fight with someone in college, you might in practice keep having similar fights like that over and over again, but you will learn very quickly and understand like, oh, this is an issue that I have that I need to get over.
Exactly,
you know?
Yeah. Mars in the 9th house can be very quick to be kind of righteously indignant. They believe their things. They have this core set of rules and who they are and what they will do. And so even if it's a big authority tries to come in and say no, they're not going to have it. Because Mars in the 9th house, I think, is very much like, it's about what is right. And if I am right, even if you're in a position of authority, or even if you're telling me this or that, and I should respect you, I do not have to, because this is it.
Because
it's not stand up for this. It's not just.
Like what grinds your gears, what gets you angry, what gets you upset, can be things having to do with justice. And it
what is
could,
fair.
Yeah, a lot of times it's like you might not take things very personally unless it's an obstruction of justice, unless it's not fair to you, or the bigger picture, because the ninth house again is the bigger picture. It's like it's wrong in the bigger picture of things. It's not just that
you forgot to put away your dishes.
It's the fact that you don't know how, and how will we ever be able to live cohesively if you don't know that you have to rinse your dish before you put it in the
and then
dishwasher.
there's the mess, and then there's the bug.
You not putting away your dishes, what does that say about your respect for me?
Yes.
What does that say? Dude, I could get fucking pissed about this, like, right fucking now.
Yeah.
I think it's like you owe me respect just because that's...
I'm a person and it's fair.
Yeah, exactly, it's fair. Like, Mars in the ninth house probably doesn't think like, oh, in the Capricornian way, like, you earn respect. You earn a position of respect and then you get respected. It's like, this is what's fair.
We are
Respect
equal.
me.
We should all be respected.
Which
naturally.
is where issues with authority figures come in, because that's kind of like, oh, I read this thing probably on Tumblr like in 2011 of like, teachers sometimes equate you have to respect me or I won't respect you with you have to treat me as an authority or I won't treat you as a human.
Yes, that's so true. That is true.
Sagittarius is like, everyone's a human. Everyone deserves justice.
No, my dad has this placement and he very much was like, if a teacher's not right, just tell him. And I was like, okay. And that's my Saturn to my 10th house. That's the principle of the thing.
He's like, practically, this is not going to help you out in life, but I don't want you going against the principle of it.
Exactly. Mars in the ninth house will also probably have pretty strong religious views. Even if those religious views are atheism, they'll probably not just be somebody who's like, meh, I don't know what I believe. They'll know what they believe, they'll really want to stand behind it, and they'll really fight for it, maybe even a little bit too aggressively, maybe in their younger years. What they were given religious-wise when they were younger, they took it and really ran with it. But then when they got older, their mind expanded, they got to know more things, and then that might come into questioning. And so it's not that Mars will stick with one religion always and not question it, Mars in the ninth house, but they will always very much stand up for their views, their political views, their religious views, and it's mutable. So it can change, but whatever it is, they will fight for. It can be a little much, but it also...
But Mars is always a little much, you know? What are you gonna do?
Jupiter in the ninth house. Whew. So you have a lot of luck in your life, honestly, and you find a lot of luck through learning, through teachers. You probably have a lot of very good teachers in your life, mentors, spiritual guides, or just general older people, wise, that kind of took you under their wing, maybe, or you just have a lot of respect for teachers, or you always want to be the teacher. You know, maybe when you were younger, you were the person always asking questions and also answering them as well. Just a lot of luck and abundance. It's just a very good lucky placement.
Yeah.
It's very intuitive. It loves to be here. It's two good things coming together, making more good.
Yeah, Jupiter, whatever house it's in, is going to attract good things in the area of your life. So having Jupiter in the ninth house just means like you attract learning very easily. You don't have probably a very hard time with
understanding
things, looking beyond the horizon. Traveling is something that doesn't cause you as much stress as it might other people.
You probably traveled a lot when you know, in your life. You've gotten to know a lot of different people, cultures, and it's given you a lot of
enrichment.
Yes, enrichment, that's a good word. It can be an overabundance too. Maybe you get too infatuated with one topic and you know every goddamn thing about it. This could even be somebody who, you know those like really niche books? I feel like that would be written by Jupiter in the ninth house. You know what I mean? It's like, how to properly fish only when using this kind of fish hook in the summertime.
Yeah, that's an abundance of knowledge.
Because you can get so into a topic.
You need kind of a topic that has a never-ending well of things, because you're just like, I want to get into something and just get into it. A lot of people have a hard time starting up new hobbies or new ventures because they don't like the idea of being a beginner.
Right.
With Jupiter in the ninth house, you don't like the idea of being an ender. You don't like the idea of ever like being satisfied with the amount of knowledge where you're like, I'm an expert, I have a degree, and that's all I need. Like, you're constantly seeking to have a never-ending pool of knowledge.
These are the kind of people that get labeled a perpetual student.
Yes.
These could even be somebody who went to multiple colleges, got multiple degrees.
Yeah.
You found college, you loved it, and you're a professor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, at least I think. It's a really positive mentality to have around learning things, because like I said, a lot of people don't like starting things with the idea that they have to be a beginner at the beginning, and there are so many things in this world to dive into that are just like you'll never stop learning, and it's really great that that doesn't inhibit you from starting. And in fact, like the idea of ever reaching a finish line is too stifling for you.
Yeah. I think this gives a lot more hope and optimism, almost to the point like eternal optimism. You'll be like, everything always turns out okay for me. Unless you have a really, really negatively aspected Jupiter, you're probably like, everything's gonna be okay, to the point that you'll take a lot more risks and a lot more questionable moves and possibly hurt people in the process, not out of anything malicious, just out of almost like that selfish want to say yes. You're probably a person with so many stories, such an interesting life. You're just very willing and eager.
I'm reading this book called Moonology, which is all about how to manifest with the phases of the moon. And a big thing that is emphasized in that book is, in order to manifest anything, you have to believe that it can actually happen.
Right.
Like, you can manifest for whatever you want. You can manifest to make $1 million a week, but if you manifest it not thinking that
if you don't believe in your deep heart,
you need to like very much actually believe it in order for the manifestation to be at all worth it.
Yeah.
And I think that with Jupiter in the 9th house, that's not something that you're going to struggle with very much. Like if you are manifesting in something, you're like, yeah, and I totally believe that it can happen. Like, yeah.
Just be careful to not get too comfortable in your good luck and the things do naturally come to you, because I think there can be a laziness with this placement a little bit, which is like the worst thing that comes with this placement. Just because you know everything will be okay, you'll kind of get just a little bit complacent and a little bit careless. At the end of the day, everything probably will be fine. Yeah. You can party too hard, you can go too much, you can, you know what I mean? You can get into yourself into some very questionable scenarios, but at the end of the day, all it probably really winds up being is a good fucking story.
Yeah.
Saturn, the 9th house.
Okay.
So you probably grew up with a very strict father, or possibly a limiting father, or you probably had one religion that you grew up with and that was told to be the right way.
Yeah, also, even if it's not religion, even if it's not necessarily higher education or this, that, or the other, I think where Saturn in the 9th house, like the general thing to say is you were told that one path was the only way to take.
That's a much better word.
You can only take one path.
Don't stray. Saturn in the 9th house can take many directions. I know two people with pretty good examples of how different it can go. One girl I know, and she's from a super small town, and immediately that's going to kind of limit your beyond the horizon thinking, just because when you live in such a small town, there are much fewer kind of life paths you can take and much less opportunities, unfortunately. And so it's kind of like you feel much more cut and dried what you can do. You know, the world isn't as open to you. And there could also be, it doesn't have to be as religiously stifling as you may think it is, because I know somebody with this placement grew up in a very religiously spiritual kind of Indian household, but it was very much like, that is the way. And so as spiritual and open and blah blah as it is, it's still the only way.
Or even as much as how that, to our perspective, is like, oh, that is so beyond the horizon. Like to him,
that's what
it's not.
It's not. That's what you're raised around.
Yeah.
This is somebody who has a much more strict view of religion and life and just their way of looking at things. Like, you want to find one correct way, you're going to stick with it and really hone in. And just in general, this is somebody that, even more extreme than most 9th house placements, will really pick a select few very specific things to hone in on and concentrate on.
To kind of paint a picture, this is the kind of person in college who doesn't go out and who's just like so focused in on what they have to do for their education and
probably majoring in something very serious, studying like this makes sense.
Yeah, responsible and not necessarily delving into like, oh, let me take this course on the science of happiness.
Right.
It's just streamlining and still looking beyond the horizon, but through a telescope rather than taking in the whole sunset.
Somebody with a little bit more of a pessimistic outview on life, just because whenever you try to, I'm just gonna throw myself into this, or hopefully everything will be okay, it just kind of winds up not that you're like perpetually doomed, But it's just that everything fun kind of comes with a learning experience, and that can get very tiring very quickly, and it can make a person that says no to a lot more things just out of like
self-preservation.
That feeling of this is gonna go wrong for me.
Yeah. So a bit more of a pessimistic person, and also perhaps more of a skeptic.
Yes.
But if you do have any beliefs, whether it is atheism, whether it is any other religion or spiritual inclination, you're very much all about that. It's kind of like there's no real room for debate.
Is the meaning.
Yeah.
And I know it.
This is my belief, and it is what it is. And it's taken as truth. There's not a lot of room for receptivity.
And you probably practice whatever it is you practice in a very regimented way, and how it's supposed to be practiced. You don't go outside the norm. It's very much like buy whatever that book is. You just may not have as fun teachers. Like maybe you grew up in a religious school, or just a very like private, regimented, structured school. There's just not a lot of room for freedom in your life, unfortunately. And when you go out and you travel, you just find that problems arise. You're always the person to lose your luggage. Things don't go as planned. It's just hard to go out and do things and feel freedom from it. If anything, it may feel like it restricts you more.
You kind of have this perception overall that there is a right way to do things. Things can go very black and white, right or wrong for you, where that is not necessarily the energy that a lot of other ninth house placements carry with them.
And your father was probably a person that definitely was,
this is the right way to do things.
Like there are probably pretty strict rules in your household. You knew what was okay and what wasn't.
Yeah, and the ninth house also kind of deals with morality, so morality to you can be very black or white, and you can be maybe sort of an unforgiving person. Like there's no difference between a white lie. Everything is condemnable by death.
This is somebody who might not even be very open to other cultures, other walks of life, just because any deviation from the norm is a little bit uncomfortable to you. It's just a little bit more of a closed mind, unfortunately.
You just very much have this one path.
Uranus in the ninth house. In some ways this is very intuitive, but in other ways it's a little bit frustrating, because obviously Uranus will shake up very much any house that it's in, and the ninth house is already a pretty shaken house. This is somebody with unconventional views, unconventional ideas, and probably an unconventional religious upbringing. Uranus in the ninth house will always start with an open mind towards something, right? And go, oh, this is a new thing. Well, let's see what the, best idea is, or what I fit in the best. So do all the research. They can really, really go down the rabbit hole of things very easily, really want to consume all the information, and then they come out the other side and go, okay, this is what I've decided it is, and you cannot change my mind. So there's like a small tinge where they have a very open mind, but then after they come out the other side, it's hard to convince them otherwise, and they can get a little preachy and a little bit like my way or the highway, which is sometimes it's good for the person if they don't have as stable other parts of their charts, then at least they have a stable view.
I think the way that this makes the most sense, because you hear like, Uranus, totally outside of the box, but also rules a fixed sign that is unwavering in their beliefs, and that's because Uranus thinks outside of the box, in the ninth house especially, believes outside of the box. And if you bring them something that is in the box, they're not going to take that.
Yes, this is somebody that will almost go out of their way to not be the conventional, to not do the conventional, almost does not want to be associated, and can find that like offensive, you know what I mean, to at all be considered a part of society or a part of these kind of basic ideals. It's almost like they don't want to be included in some circumstances.
Or in terms of knowledge, they're just looking to discover something. They're looking to find out information that isn't taken for granted. They want to get outside of the box. Uranus is revolution, so they want to discover something that will revolutionize something. It rules technology, so perhaps your higher education path has to do with innovative technology, just something innovative, whether it's finding a cure for whatever, whether it's inventing a new form of dance, you want to look beyond the horizon and then shoot yourself off to outer space. You want to not just make the most out of all the information that is given to you, but go above and beyond and to do something with that information, to do something that makes a difference with that information and
impacts people, impacts the masses.
Exactly. So if you do So if you do anything normal with the information that you're given, because the 9th house is a Canaan house leading into the 10th house. So if you take your higher education to pursue a 10th house career that is normal, that is something that your uncle did, that is something that a lot of people do, that's not very satisfactory to Uranus in the 9th house. You want to do something with your higher education.
Barriers.
Yeah, that will break barriers, that will do something big and different and outside of the box.
Yeah. I have Aquarius in the 9th house, so I have some similar themes in a sense. And a perfect example is this astrology channel. Astrology is not something, it's slowly becoming more accepted, but we've definitely hit enough backlash that I think it could say it fits into this category. Yeah. Uranus energy and Sagittarius energy, as kooky and out there as they are, they're also both kind of facts based. You know what I mean? So I find that as much as I am into astrology and all these things, I don't have as much of a spiritual connection as most people within these realms do. I've always wished I was honestly more spiritual, so this is not me hating on people being spiritual. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm just trying to say that you might find that you have a much more grounded or something view of religion and the spiritual topics that you partake in than most. So I was younger and I was raised in a Jewish household. I very much connected to Judaism, never in a spiritual way. I was like, but I was like, I get the culture of it. Like, I get the whole point of the tradition, and I like that. I like bringing the family together, doing these things, keeping the stuff alive, but I didn't really have this kind of like God connection to it. And that's not what you need as Uranus in the 9th house.
Yeah. I mean, you bringing up the culture and the community aspect of it is huge in terms of Uranus ruling Aquarius, which is all about networking and communities of people.
Yeah, you probably had some weird teachers growing up with a lot more liberal views or ideals than most people. You have much more of an open mind in a lot of ways, but also it can get a little preachy, of course, and it can get a little bit like, I won't hear what you have to say if I've already made my decision.
And it can get a little, not as skeptical as Saturn, but more facts oriented.
Yes, that's exactly,
well, scientifically.
Right.
How does this line up? You wanted to see a bit of evidence, seeing how things play out, and seeing in practical application.
You're not just going to take somebody else's opinion as fact. You have to experience it yourself.
Absolutely.
You have to envelop yourself. It's not as, like Jupiter and Neptune in the 9th house might be much more willing to just kind of let yourself surrender to it. Uranus is going to be a lot more picky.
You're not open,
right?
But you're not too receptive.
Yeah. And you also just have very different out-of-the-box ideas on how humanity and people should be run, maybe very radical ideas.
And ideas on how to change the world.
This is somebody who likes change. You get bored very easily. You want to constantly be moving around. It can be a very restless energy. And just in general, I think this is a very, very, very accepting energy towards other people, other communities.
Uranus is very unpredictable. So in the 9th house, it can get a bit too unpredictable in terms of just like logistics of things, logistics of traveling or what you're going to do with higher education. It's like you can't predict how necessarily any of that is going to happen because Uranus will very quickly throw a wrench in your spokes of the 9th house,
Yeah. And this is also somebody who, when they got out into college and they left their hometown, they really felt, I think there's a very big freedom that comes from that because now you're like, I'm able to let my weirdness shine. I'm at this new place. I'm already feeling out of place. So you really take in and become much more of your own person when you go off to school.
Neptune in the 9th house. So we're bringing up, Sagittarius versus Pisces and 9th house versus 12th house. And here's the marriage of the two.
Now this is actually not too bad of a placement for Neptune, which is rare.
In some ways kind of intuitive, in some ways you're like, oh wait, it shouldn't be necessarily like that, Because the 9th house is about expanding your horizons, broadening your horizons, looking beyond the horizon in terms of using your mind, growing your actual knowledge of real things that exist on this plane.
Yeah.
The way that Neptune in the 9th house interprets it is
It feels. It's intuitive.
It's your beliefs are governed by your intuition.
You're like, oh, I feel this to be true, so therefore it is.
Yeah, it can be very hard to delve into higher education of more rigid subjects in which there is a right answer, whereas humanities and things where there are several valid points that you can make,
not one finite answer,
are easier to maneuver than math or science and stuff like that, because everything that you learn kind of feels like kind of learning it through osmosis.
Yes, yeah.
Of just like, oh, this is right, this makes sense, and this is how I'm learning it. It's hard to kind of attack certain lessons in a very like, well, this makes sense because of black and white ABC.
Right.
You're like, it's not computing, I'm not osmosising it.
What I'm feeling is this. Neptune in the 9th, I think that the biggest drawback to it is because it is so governed by how it's intuitively feeling and the things it's picking up on, these are people that very much can easily follow the wrong person.
False God.
And also most likely to kind of be swept up into a cult.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, even Nina with Pisces in the 9th, you've had people intuitively pick you out as like, oh, you want to join this cult?
I have a fucking drawer full of pamphlets of people asking me to join their cult.
Yeah, they can pick up on the receptiveness.
Yeah, someone followed me.
Yeah, one side of town to another.
Yeah, for me to join their cult. Just to clarify that was the kind of stalking that was taking place.
Because also Neptune in the 9th can get very clouded and be like, oh, this is how humanity should live, and this lovely symbiotic nature, blah 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 blah. And it's not that that's where they go wrong, that idea. It's just the fact that they can easily get disillusioned by their teachers and follow follow people that possibly aren't the best or shouldn't be followed just because you know.
Yeah, it's the age-old issue of Neptune where it gives you such great intuition. You could even have like genius-like qualities just because you pick up on things and you're like, I don't know where this came from, I just have a great intuitive gift. But at the same time, it lives through rose-tinted glasses.
And it can be easily manipulated.
Yeah. So here we are, we're phoning it in. And that means we're recording on our phone because the camera died.
You'll find in upper education you might attach to a much more spiritual side of you, finally letting that come through. Isn't really able to be accepted, or you're not being able to fully realize it until you go off and you're kind of free, and you're free to kind of, you know, find your own religious feelings, and a lot of them are going to be much more spiritually inclined and much more felt than found.
There might just be like a trigger, right, of spirituality once you reach into higher education, or that could be the entire purpose of why you pursue higher education, or why you don't pursue formal higher education and you decide to travel or you decide to expand your horizons in some other way. Here's a real party trick for you, is that any water sign or Neptune in the 9th house will show you enjoying voyages in water where you travel. So you like a good beach destination with Neptune in the 9th house. Well, cruises are fucking scary. I don't know what the fuck kind of person you are if you like cruises. So.
I just think that they're lame.
Yeah, lame and scary.
You know what I mean? I think because Sagittarius, it's so much, and Neptune has a real ability to give. This can be somebody who has a huge ability to give to others, to give themselves up to others. And I think this is somebody who can be a big emotional healer as well.
There's a big feeling of just anything that you believe comes to you. You know, it comes to you intuitively. There's no way to go about it any other way.
Yeah,
there's no way for you to
factually comprise these things.
Right. You can't even like bother reading the Bible if you wanted to. It's just like I just need to be guided with my gut in what I'm going to believe, and no one can really argue with you about it, and you don't really care to argue with anyone about it. Although people will probably also call you spacey, like this is a placement where people might call you spacey.
For sure. Or just kind of naive, and they see you as a bit too willing, because you don't need facts to back up your beliefs. Beliefs are ruled by the Sagittarius house, so you're going to probably speak to somebody with Sag or ninth house energy about your beliefs, and dear Lord, if you do not have facts to back up your beliefs and you're talking to somebody with ninth house stuff, they will just not want to hear it, and they will see you as manipulative bull, which you kind of are, but only when you want to give yourself up to that.
I think the thing with Neptune, it's so receptive that it becomes vulnerable.
Yes.
And that's where the intuition comes from, is because you are so receptive, but you don't have much protecting you just because you are so receptive. So people can take advantage of that receptivity, but that receptivity is also the same thing that gives you like these divine downloads.
And Neptune's always hard to clarify what is true and what isn't. So it's a kind of a foggy planet, so it makes your ninth house a foggy house. If somebody's speaking from a Neptunian or Pisces place, as the other person, I would never want to deny or agree with that. And not a lot of people will respect that. Neither person will ever for sure know if something is true or not. Who are you to deny what the other person is feeling?
Yeah.
So you kind of just gotta surrender, and you gotta let things be. And I think that with Neptune in the ninth house, that's why things become more personal, because the more you share, the more backlash it'll get.
Yeah. And on the one hand, you can be seen as like totally spacey in this, that, or the other. But because, again, the ninth house is a Caton house, it leads into the 10th house. If you somehow make your career about it, the perception can be switched around to people being like, oh, wow, she has, or he has such an amazing intuitive gift. They have so much information and like knowledge on this very spiritual topic, you know? Lastly, Pluto in the 9th house.
This is a pretty radical placement. These are people that tend to be pretty religious in whatever form it may be, but the rebels within that religion. You know, this is the kind of person that might be Catholic, but will speak out for gay marriage. You know, and be like, I am Catholic and this is how Catholicism should be. You know, and it's going to be big and radical, and these are people who don't want to hear what you have to say as much, but they also are going to be kind of some of the greatest revolutionaries in the world.
I think a really big example of someone who might have Pluto in the 9th house is someone who is soaked in religion in a way that really negatively affects them, to the point where, because it's the planet of death and regeneration, you're soaked in it, and it has such a negative impact on you, because Pluto can negatively color any house, and you have this like horrible association with religion to the point where you have to kill it off and reinvent your beliefs totally in a totally opposite direction. And Pluto also rules research, so I just see this as someone like, for example, being brought up Mormon, and like, or very evangelical,
very controlling
and just being steeped in this negative version of religion and having it affect you very negatively, breaking free from that, and then rewiring your thought process into being a very research oriented person in terms of how you go about your beliefs, or just like being really into science, being really into just like facts and higher education in a research oriented area. And even if there is no trauma with religion and beliefs, Pluto in the 9th house in itself can show you taking a very strong research path in your higher education.
It's just going to be somebody with very radical ideals that they think are right. At the end of the day, they almost want power through their radical ideas, because they believe they know how to believe and think and live the best. Where your Pluto is where you want power. So you might find that you want power through your religious organization, you want to be the head. This could even be somebody who's like a cult leader or a religious leader. Also, there are power struggles within that field as well. So maybe you were very stifled in school, or just you had very controlling teachers, very bad experiences with teachers. These are people with extreme ideas, and there can be a greatness in that, and there can be such power that these are people that can really change the world, but it's going to be constantly fought against as well. You're going to run into a lot of issues with people of power. Also a questionable placement if you want to travel much. Because you might not be as willing to surrender yourself over to the culture of things. And I think that you're also going to be very critical of every place that you go to, because like I said, you have in your idea how things should be. So you might be like, oh, I can't wait to go to this place, blah, 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 blah. And then you get there and you're like, this is not what I expected. This is not what I was told it would be. Or you might just be like, I want to keep my same cultures and ideas. Like, I don't want to have to bend to these people's. I shouldn't have to. And that could just be in every
just power
facet.
struggles. Power struggles when it comes to beliefs that you have differing with other people. When it comes to what you experience in higher education. It can speak to a negative experience in religion. It can speak to a negative experience in higher education. It can speak to a negative experience in traveling, or a catalytic experience that changes your beliefs. Like very likely if you have Pluto in the 9th house, you grew up believing one thing and then radically, catalytically changed into a different belief.
I think these people that might have more nihilistic, somber ideals. I have this in a composite chart with somebody. When we come together, we both have the idea of
there's no hope.
And to a certain extent, it just goes back to this world is so messed up innately. Like we're already so innately messed up within ourselves that there's no way to fix it. So because of that, that's a very Pluto in the 9th house thing of that catalytic. You just got to destroy it all and start over kind of situation.
We need another Noah's Ark. We need another fire. We need another this or that.
And so this can really be, like Saturn in the 9th house, a little bit more of a hopeless, nihilistic, pessimistic kind of person, but also somebody who never gives up, always keeps fighting. You'll not give in to whatever people might be telling you very easily. You have much more of a solid foundation, and like Mars in the 9th house, you're gonna keep going. You know, Pluto doesn't want to lose a fight very easily, so you do have much more of an oomph in life and a want and a like almost like a lust to get to wherever you want to be. You're a force to be reckoned with in a lot of ways.
I think Pluto more than Saturn is a little more jaded.
Yes.
Because there's a
there's a bitterness.
Yeah, there is a catalytic event.
Yeah.
Is what I would
for
assume
sure
for you in your life.
Yeah, I think that these are the people to manipulate the 9th house Neptunes to follow them. I think there is a certain sense of humor though also to Pluto in the 9th house because of that want to break these social structures and these things that are held that they don't want. Like I don't know, I remember hearing about like Michelangelo and how he didn't want to paint the Sistine Chapel, and so he hid all these kind of like funny hidden messages in there, and he still did it, but he did it with subtle fuck yous, and that's Pluto in the 9th house. The subtle fuck yous like that.
That is all we have to say about the planetary placements of the 9th house. Make sure to check out the first part of our 9th house videos if you want to, as well as our blog post on 9th house cusp rulers to see what your 9th house cusp ruler has to do with that. And of course, if you feel so inclined, check out our readings at partychickastrology.com/shop. If they're not in stock at the moment, at whatever time you're reading this, they're always in stock at the first of every month.
Our 10th house video is up next, so
stay tuned.
The last angular house, baby. Yeah. We're in our last quadrant. Bye.
Bye.